Good afternoon, brothers and sisters. Welcome everyone to another webinar. I just want to say I'm pleased to be able to be with you again this evening, and I am happy for the privilege of being here. I pray as always that our Father will bless us as we study together. All right, maybe I will be a bit short this evening. I'm going to cut it short because for two reasons. First of all, there is somebody here doing some work. I just barely was able to break off. That's why I'm a little bit, a minute or two late. And I kind of need to go and see what is going on. And secondly, for some reason I feel I have a slight fever with a little bit of a headache. So I think if I, I'm not sure what is causing it, but I think if I break off a little earlier and get some rest, it will be helpful. All right? So I might end early this evening. It depends on how things go. If we really get into it, then I'm sure I'm not going to be short. But welcome everyone, and let's just acknowledge the presence of the Lord as we pray. Father, thank you for the benefit and the blessing we have in being able to meet together, to worship you as we share together in fellowship and in the study of your word. I just want to express appreciation, Father, that every time we come together, no matter where, no matter how gloomy circumstances might seem, you always bless us. We always are able to gain some insight into your word and some understanding that is helpful. As we gather together this evening from all different parts of the world, it is my prayer, Father, that you will once again bless us, not just with intellectual information, but also with a deeper and closer relationship with you, a binding of our hearts to yours, as we come to love you more and more. I thank you, Father, for hearing my prayer now and always. In Jesus' name, amen. All right, so we have been going through the book of John, and we are now at chapter 10. I hardly know which of the chapters in John is my favorite. There are so many of them that are outstanding. I think if I have to make a choice, I might choose maybe chapter 14, where it talks about Jesus being with you and being in you, the Comforter, that promise of the Comforter, maybe. But so many of these chapters, so much of this book of John is outstanding. Chapter 11, the resurrection of Lazarus. Chapter 1, Jesus is the revelation of God. Chapter 3, a man must be born again to see the kingdom. Chapter 4, God is spirit, and those who worship must worship in spirit and in truth. Chapter 7, the one who believes on me, out of his belly shall flow rivers of living water. Chapter 8, you shall know the truth, and the truth shall make you free. And on and on. So it's full of beautiful gems, the whole book. And this evening, as we look at chapter 10, it's again one of those passages that has beautiful truth in it. You know, John is really, I would say, my second favorite writer in the Bible. Well, I think Paul is my number one. All right, I've gained so much understanding from Paul that it is mind blowing. That's the word I would use. But John is pretty close. John lets you into the heart of God, into the heart of Jesus, like nobody else. And of course, John has given us the book of Revelation. So John is one of my favorites. Anyway, having said that, let's go straight to the book of John, and we're going to start with chapter 10 this evening. And last week we were looking at the man who was healed, who was born blind, and we saw that this man was responsible for presenting some tremendous truths to the scribes and Pharisees. We saw that this man was disfellowshipped, kicked out of they cast him out, whatever that means. I suppose he wasn't welcome in their synagogues anymore. And it was at that point that Jesus found him and he got to know Jesus. So it's amazing because this story is still being repeated today. Many people are only beginning to understand who Jesus is. They're only getting to know him and to appreciate him and to understand the ways of Christ when they have been put out of the churches. It's amazing, but it seems to be a recurring reality. And I would say that the reason for this is that, even though these denominations, whether you mean Catholic, Baptist, Jehovah's Witnesses, Seventh-day Adventists, or any of the Pentecostal groups, these denominations, I suppose, were established, I suppose technically they said, as a way of drawing people to Christ. But I don't think that practically this is how they operate. Christ started the church to be a family, to be a fellowship, to be his body, and to be a tool for enlightening the world. But as you know, as there has been apostasy, first of all with the Roman Catholic Church, and then with the churches that tended to break away from Rome, it was because of doctrinal position. And later on you had Pentecostalism, Seventh-day Adventists, Jehovah's Witnesses, these groups that broke away from the traditional churches. Again, it was because they believed that these groups were in doctrinal apostasy. So, as you can imagine, all of them have a great emphasis on doctrinal correctness. Okay? Their main focus is not winning people to Christ. Their main focus is winning people to their organization and to their particular doctrine. And this is why people who belong to these groups, you often find that many of them don't have a real relationship with Christ, because these groups are doctrine-oriented, not Christ-oriented. They're not focused on Christ, they're focused on doctrine. And so because of this, they may develop doctrinal correctness in some cases, but the people are left dry and without any substance to their religious experience. And as I said, many times it is only when they are put out of these churches that you find that they actually meet Christ. It's a tragedy, but it's true. And I believe that the last movement is going to be a movement out of the churches. I believe this. So you will understand that this is one reason why somebody like me, I'm very careful, I'm very anxious that, in the ministry that I represent, in the fellowship that I belong to, I'm very anxious that we don't become doctrine oriented. I mean, I know that everything that we learn about Christ is a doctrine in some kind of way. Religious experience is based on doctrine. But what I mean is that the doctrinal emphasis that I want to embrace is the doctrine that focuses us on who Christ is and on a relationship with Christ and his Father. That's what I'm after. And maybe I should say this absolutely straight up. This is one of the things I find in the movement that is referred to as the One God movement. There are a great number of people involved, and a great number of those who are in leadership position in this movement, those who are teachers, let me put it that way. What they are concerned about is the mechanics of the doctrine. They are interested in proving the doctrine. In many cases, I have not found that there is an emphasis on getting people to know Jesus and his Father in a personal way, as living persons. As a matter of fact, in some branches of that movement, they have actually driven Christ far away, and they've actually said that it is through angels or through the scriptures that we actually have fellowship with God and his Son, that they are not actually with us. The doctrines that they embrace actually cause a barrier between the people and Christ. So, I'm saying that, I really hope and pray that we will be able to avoid that trap. But anyway, I'm saying this, my point was that as you look at the Bible, you can see that in many cases, the people who have found Christ have been the people who have been put out of the churches. So now we come to John chapter 10. And now Jesus goes to another beautiful illustration of the relationship between himself and his people. He says, verily, verily. I like when Jesus uses the words verily, verily, because it's almost like we would say today, trust me. Even though we use that phrase loosely, so sometimes it's not really significant. It's like we would say, I'm telling you the truth. You can trust what I'm saying. You know, he's not just using a common phrase. He's actually saying, he's adding strength to what he's saying. He says, truly, truly, I say unto you, he that entereth not by the door into the sheepfold, but climbeth up some other way, the same is a thief and a robber. So, Jesus introduces us to an illustration here, which has a few elements. First of all, you see that there are sheep. Secondly, you see that there's a door. And secondly, you see that there's a sheepfold. And fourthly, you see that there is somebody involved, or people involved, who are thieves and robbers. Each element of this illustration is important. A sheepfold, a door, a sheep, and the thief and the robber. And he's going to say some more as we continue, but I want us to consider those four elements of what he has said in just in the opening verse. So, it's clear. Well, it's not so clear. There are many people. Let me highlight false teaching. First of all, almost every denomination will tell you that their denomination is the sheepfold. All right, you know, maybe Roman Catholicism is the biggest denomination of all, and it has the most abominable teachings of all. But Roman Catholics teach that their church, their denomination, is the only church. And even though there are some elements of Catholicism that try to mute this actual idea, but Catholicism officially teaches that there's no salvation out of the Catholic Church. So they identify themselves as a sheepfold. I've heard it with the Adventist Church. I wouldn't say that all Adventists believe this, but I've heard it from the hierarchical level. I've heard a conference president actually teach this. You know, I think I still have the sermon where he says, the Seventh-day Adventist Church is the gate of heaven, is a door of heaven. And once you're at the door, you're there. That's almost an exact quote of what he said, you know. And of course, I believe the Jehovah's Witnesses believe the same thing. And most denominations believe in one way or another that there's this elite special group, that it is necessary for you to be a part of their system. Now, Jesus says, the one who enters not by the door into the sheepfold. And so, of course, if any religious group on earth represents a sheepfold, what we are saying applies to that denomination. Of course, you know, all of us are in agreement. We as we would say in Jamaica, we burn that teaching. We burn that idea. We abolish and repudiate and condemn such a teaching that any human institution should dare to undertake such a title as being the sheepfold, because the sheepfold is a place of safety, and there's no denomination that is such a place on this earth. But let's continue, and as we continue, it will become a little more clear how it absolutely is wrong to try to say this. It says in verse 2, but he that entereth in by the door is a shepherd of the sheep. Now Jesus gives you the ideas before he explains them. So maybe I will read down to verse 5 and then I'll go back and explain. I'll read the ideas first of all. It says, the one who enters by the door is a shepherd of the sheep. So now you have a door and now you have a shepherd. So you had a sheepfold, you have robbers, you have sheep, you have the door, and then you have the shepherd of the sheep. Several elements. To him the porter openeth, and the sheep hear his voice, And he calleth his own sheep by name, and leadeth them out. And when he putteth forth his own sheep, he goeth before them, and the sheep follow him, for they know his voice. And a stranger will they not follow, but will flee from him, for they know not the voice of strangers. Let me read on. This is one evening when I'm going to read through most of it and then go back and break it down. This parable spake Jesus unto them, but they understood not what things they were which he spake unto them. Then said Jesus unto them again. Now he goes from the parable and he goes to the real interpretation. Truly, truly, there's that phrase again. I say unto you, I am the door of the sheep. All that ever came before me are thieves and robbers, but the sheep did not hear them. I am the door. By me, if any man enter in, he shall be saved, and shall go in and out, and find pasture. The thief cometh not, but for to steal, and to kill, and to destroy. I am come that they might have life, and that they might have it more abundantly. I am the good shepherd. The good shepherd giveth his life for the sheep. But he that is an hireling, and not the shepherd, whose own the sheep are not, seeth the wolf coming, and leaveth the sheep, and fleeth. And the wolf catcheth them, and scattereth the sheep. The hireling fleeth, because he is an hireling, and careth not for the sheep. I am the good shepherd, and know my sheep, and am known of mine. So now that we have read down to verse 14, we're going to go back and look at the elements of the story and see where we fit into it and how we can understand it. All right? So, Jesus says there are two classes of people. First of all, he starts with that. The thief and the robber does not go in by the door, but he climbs some other way. Now, Jesus says, I'm going to put the same passage in the right panel so we can compare the different things that are said as we proceed. All right? So we're at John 10, but we're going to scroll down a little bit more in the right panel to the interpretation. All right? So the interpretation starts with about verse 7. So when Jesus says, the thief and the robber does not go in by the door, what does he mean? Well, look at what he says. I say unto you that I am the door of the sheep. So what can we learn from this? We learn that there are people in the sheepfold, or there are people in the Christian church who did not come through the door, which is Jesus Christ. And I think all of us know this. Now, there is a, let me look at you all while I'm saying this. There is a sense in which the only people who belong to the Church of Christ are those who come through Christ. There's a sense in which if a person is not born again, he doesn't belong to Christ. That's what Romans 8 and verse 8 and 9 says. It says that if any man have not the Spirit of Christ, he's none of his. So it doesn't matter whether you are in the Christian church or out of the church. If you don't have the Spirit of Christ, you don't belong to him. You're not a part of his true fold. There is a sense in which it is so. But there's another sense in which everybody who goes by the name Christian belongs to the Christian church. And Jesus is showing us this in his teaching here. He says, people get into the sheepfold. The sheepfold has to be the Christian church. Not a denomination, mind you, but a fold, the safety, the place of safety that is called by the name of Christ, the sheepfold. There are people who come in not by the door. They don't come in through Christ. You see that there are ways to get into the church outside of Christ. And there are myriads of people who are in the Christian church in this way. Some have made an intellectual acceptance of Christianity. Some have gotten into Christianity to be pastors or leaders as a profession. They go to university or college and they study theology and they come out to be leaders in the particular group that they belong to. But they don't come through Christ. And Jesus says they have climbed up some other way. and they are thieves and robbers. I like this chapter. I like this parable because it is so clear. You don't really need to be too confused about how to understand it. In verse 2 he says, but he that entereth in by the door is a shepherd of the sheep. Now I think this word here, shepherd of the sheep, I think it has two applications, this phrase. I think it means, first of all, Jesus. But I think secondly it means those who have been sent by Christ to take care of the sheep, to be under shepherds. Right, and I'll show you why. Because it says, he that enter in by the door. If Jesus is the door, is Jesus saying, I enter by myself? In a sense, that is true. Right? Jesus is a part of the church. Jesus is a part of the whole process of salvation because of who he is. You could say he enters by himself, maybe. But I think what he's saying here, the shepherd here has two implications, because it talks about the thief and the robber who climbs up over the wall. Then it talks about somebody who goes in by the door. And clearly that one is not a thief and a robber. That one is a shepherd of the sheep. And I think he's referring to himself, as I said, first of all, but he's also referring to those who are his under shepherds, those that he has appointed to work in nurturing, in shepherding, in pastoring, in feeding his sheep. And they come in through Christ. And because they have come in through Christ, they are able to provide something for the sheep. The thief and the robber is only thinking about himself. His business is not the sheep. His business is himself. Jesus says in interpreting it, all that ever came before me are thieves and robbers, but the sheep did not hear them. Now, I don't think in this case he's talking about people like Moses, of course. Moses came before Jesus. But I don't think Moses ever claimed to be the shepherd of the sheep. I think he's referring to all those people who claim to be leaders of God's people, who claim to have the authority over the people. People like Annas and Caiaphas. And I think there were false prophets who came along in the days of Jesus who also claimed to be the Messiah. And Jesus refers to them because they tried to get into God's business, but they did not come through Christ. And he says, but the sheep did not hear them. Okay? So they were never able to start the Christian church because they never made an impact. When the disciples, I think it was when the disciples were after Pentecost, when they were starting the movement, I think it was Gamaliel who told the elders about a certain man who led about 400 people out into the wilderness, and they came to disaster. And I think that those were some of the people Jesus was talking about. They tried to start a movement and everything fell apart because the sheep did not hear them. But Jesus says the true sheep will hear the shepherd. And 2,000 years later, today, we see that the sheepfold is still intact and the sheep are still listening to the shepherd, even though there are false shepherds and there are false sheep in the sheepfold. But the sheepfold is still functioning. And Jesus here gives us an idea how to deal with it. All right, now he says, he that entereth in by the door is a shepherd of the sheep. To him the porter openeth. He's using the illustration. When the shepherd comes in the evening, I suppose, and he calls out in the Palestinian context, when you have robbers and thieves, they would lock up the place, I suppose. And the porter or the gatekeeper will open the door. And it says, and the sheep hear his voice. The sheep hear his voice. I have never really been in a position where I could pay keen attention to sheep and shepherds. I've seen a few things, like years ago when I went to Romania, I actually saw shepherds out on the hillside with their shepherd's crook, just like in Bible times, standing there and with flocks of hundreds of sheep. It was quite amazing to me because, of course, I've never seen anything like that in a place like Jamaica. But I've seen the sheep on the road, hundreds of them. And I understand that, sheep, one characteristic of sheep is that they are very prone to follow one another. I was at a home in Australia. I was on a farm in Australia. You know that Australians, they do a lot of sheep farming as well. I was told this very interesting story. The lady of the house and her daughter told me, and just in case you might be listening to this, Sister Glennis, just a shout out to you, you and Jessica. They are the ones who told me the story. They told me the story of seeing a bunch of sheep, going round and round. When you get into the yard, there is a driveway that comes in, and then it goes around a little kind of central garden, and it goes on the other side and goes back out. And they came and saw this group of sheep going round and round and round that little garden in the center. And what happened is that the first sheep started going that way, and the other sheep followed him. And when they went around the garden, that first sheep encountered the last sheep in the group. He was just going around, and that first sheep started following the last sheep, and that each sheep was following the other sheep. And those foolish sheep were going round and round and round and round endlessly until somebody came and broke it up and chased them away. And they say that's how sheep are. I think when Jesus spoke about people being sheep, it may not have been such a far out illustration because people tend to be like that. When people, compared to what is going on in the universe, the conflict between God and Satan, we need a shepherd. We need good shepherds because we are like babies, we are like children, we are like sheep. And you can see this proneness to follow people. If you look at the denominations and the religious groups, people are following people. And, so Jesus built on the idea, and he told us that we really need to have a good shepherd. Now, the shepherd goes in front and he calls his sheep. I've heard people talk about it. I've never seen it. But he doesn't stay behind and drive the sheep. He calls them, and in a flock where the shepherd and the sheep know each other, the sheep will follow the shepherd. He doesn't have to drive them because, as I said, they tend to follow a leader. He goes in front and they walk behind him. But it's interesting that Jesus says he calleth his own sheep by name, and he leadeth them out. I don't think Jesus just dropped in this statement by chance. He calls his own sheep by name. I suppose most of us have had reason to give a lot of thought to that statement. I know that I have. Okay, there are times when I go to pray or I contemplate the religious experience. There are times when I think about it, because every one of us who is a Christian, you think about your religion from time to time, and there are times I think about it and it just seems ridiculously optimistic. Just seems ridiculous for you to believe, you, one little person in a world of 8 billion people, in a universe of I don't know how many billion beings there are in the universe, but to really believe that you little tiny speck of dust, you are special, and that God takes notice of you. It really is a daunting idea. And I find myself going back to that idea many times to reassure myself, many times to really kind of rebuild my confidence that it really is so. And here you find Jesus actually doing the same thing. Jesus says the shepherd knows his sheep by name. Okay? In the world that we live in, even when you talk about the government, how it relates to the people of the country, you are a number in a census. You're a number. Nobody knows you by name. When they come to do the census, or when you go to the tax office, what they know you by is a number. And they know the number because you're in a sequence with the number that goes before and the number that goes behind. Nobody knows you. And so nobody pays any attention to you. You're not special. And if you get into some difficulty and they miscalculate, you have the devil's own time to try to get them to sort things out, because you're nobody and you mean nothing. And in a world like this, you tend to think in terms of numbers. You tend to think in terms of the way you have grown up. People don't pay attention to the insignificant and the small. And that is why I am really appreciative, and I love the way that God has really enabled us to focus on God as our Father. You know, recently again, God has brought home to my mind with greater force the fact that God and Jesus are not just my Father and my brother, but they are my friends. And I will remind you of why that is so important. There's a song that says it. I mean, sometimes I hear a song and I'm thinking, oh my goodness. Somebody else understands what I'm trying to say. When I hear the song, I realize it. And I see that there are people out there who are getting it. You know, there's a song we sang at our camp meeting a few years ago. But the title of it was, He Knows My Name. He Knows My Name. And I remember when we were singing it, how I thought about it. He knows my name. But then there's another song now, As the Deer Panteth for the Water. And one line of it says, You are my friend. You are my friend. And you are my brother, even though you are my king. It's a defiant statement. You are my friend and you are my brother, even though you are my king. Because in this world, kings are not your friends. Great people are not your friends, not in this world. They are too busy, they have too much to do. Right? So I spend some time quite often contemplating that question. Is God really my friend? And let me tell you why it means something. Because I know He's my God, okay? And let me remind you, I know I've said this before. I know He's my God. The Father is my God. And the thing is, He has no choice about being my God. He has no choice. God is God. He cannot change being God. That is who He is. When I say He is my God, all it means is that I acknowledge the truth. He's my God. Wonderful. What about being my Father? That brings it a little closer, okay? He's my Father. But even being a father, when you think of being a father in the world, being a father is like a biological reality, okay? I've even known some people who refer to their fathers as sperm donors because they never had a good relationship with them. When a person is your father, it means that you have the person's life. But it doesn't mean you have a good relationship with them. Not necessarily. And when we say Jesus is Lord, yes, that's reality. And He's my brother. Similar thing, okay? It's the positions that He's in. But when you say He's my friend, wow, you see that one, brothers and sisters, that one turns me on. You know why? Because when somebody says, I am your friend, it is by choice. Friendship is by choice. That means a person says, I like you. I think about you. I like to be in your company. I want us to hold hands and walk together. And this is what I realize that God is to me and Jesus is to me. It is tremendous, brothers and sisters, when you think about it. That is the reality, that the God Almighty, the great King, the Almighty God, is not just my God and not just my Father, but He's my friend. Look here, I am special. I am special. And those of us who recognize and accept it, so are we. You know, friendship is a two-way relationship. It's a two-way relationship. You know, God is always favorable towards us. But if we don't treat Him like a friend, the friendship cannot grow. What it means is that He is favorable towards us. He is our Savior. But friendship is a two-way relationship. And I want to tell you that it is something that every day I want to work on. Every day I want to build that relationship. I want to keep the friendship alive. I don't just want to be saved. I want to be His friend even while I'm here and living today. And that is how the Lord outlines it That's how the Lord outlines it here when he says he calls his own sheep by name. He calls them by name and he leads them out. He's trying to say that there's something special between us. I know your name. You know, even in the government, let me say, when you go to the tax office or you go to somewhere like that, some government agency, and the person who is sitting at the window say, hi David, it's good to see you. Immediately you get a warm feeling. You know, you're not going to be treated just like a number. Here's somebody who knows your name, and this person is going to see to it that you get the best possible treatment that you can get. And Jesus is saying something like that. He says that he knows his sheep. The shepherd knows his sheep by name. And when he putteth forth his own sheep, he goes before them, and the sheep follow him, for they know his voice. In this statement, brothers and sisters, you have a double comforting idea. First of all, there's no place that you can go that Jesus does not go before you. All right, I like that idea because I know there are some people who are suffering severe illness. I even know some people that I love who are suffering from cancer and all kinds of terrible situations, not just physical ailment, but sometimes financial, sometimes social situations that are really hard for them. Now, I like where it says that Jesus goes before them. The good shepherd goes before his sheep. Okay? So there's no situation that you encounter that he has not gone ahead of you and seen the situation and chosen to go through it with you. And for those of us who are going through terrible times, and our souls are crying out for mercy, and our minds are wondering, where is the Lord? There are some stories in the Bible that can give us reassurance. You can think of the story of Job. I don't know that any of us has ever suffered like Job. Job lost 10 children in one day. I am so blessed. I've never lost one. And I pray that God will keep it that way. 10 in one day. He lost the signs of wealth in those days. His camels, his donkeys, his sheep. One day, all of that was gone. And then, to cap it all off, covered from head to foot in terrible sores. And nobody to comfort him. The 3 men who came, they just started to accuse him. In moments like this, you think, oh God, you have abandoned me. But remember that before Job went through this, God went ahead of him. God had already protected him and made a decree that his life was not to be taken. God measured it. And, those children of Job that died, I know somebody might think, well, nothing could ever bring them back. But I suppose when you think about faith, there is a resurrection. There is to be a resurrection. The story is not over. It's just that our time frame covers days and months and years. But God's time frame covers millennia, thousands of years. And the time will come when there will be joy to make up for all the sorrow that we ever went through. So, I'm just saying that Jesus says the shepherd goes before them. And the sheep follow him, for they know his voice. And I want to say, that again is such a telling thing. You know, why are most of us here in this meeting this evening? I suppose for different reasons. But I'll tell you something. For most of us, the churches that you attend or that you used to attend will tell you that this teaching here is, they might call it offshoot doctrine, or they might call it false teaching. And there are many people who will try to dissuade you from fraternizing with a group like this. You know, the trend of the world is that you are locked in to what is called respectable religion. the denominations that are recognized and so on. But I like where Jesus says, the sheep follow him, for they know his voice. The sheep follow him, for they know his voice. Wherever Jesus is speaking, brothers and sisters, you know his voice. People might try to discourage and dissuade you, but if you're a true sheep, I always say, and I'd like us to make a note of this, it is not the clarity of the doctrine that is the most important thing. It's not the ability of the teacher to teach that is the most important thing. When Jesus told the parable of the man who went out and he sowed seeds, if you think about it, what was the most important thing? It was the nature of the ground that the seed fell on. Okay? Some fell on good ground, some fell on stony ground, some fell among thorns, some fell by the wayside. The decisive factor was the kind of soil that the seed fell on. And don't miss the point. Brother David may be an effective teacher, he may not be. Anybody else might be a poor teacher, he may not be. But it is not this that makes the difference. What makes the difference is that the person who is receiving the word is a true sheep. That is what makes the difference. And remember, the true sheep is the one whose heart is connected to Christ. That's the true sheep. It says the sheep know the shepherd's voice. So I use myself as an example. Not because I'm a paragon of virtue, but because my experience is the only one I know. But I can tell you, I will listen to 10 sermons for the day. I will go back and listen to people over the years, and one catches my attention, and the rest are just like so much fluff. And why? Because something in that one is answering to something in my spirit. I'm hearing the voice of the true shepherd in that one. You know, that is why people leave denominations, because they don't hear the voice of the true shepherd. And this is why people end up in certain places, because if you have the heart towards Christ, if you are one of his sheep, you will know the truth. That's what Jesus says, you shall know the truth and the truth shall make you free. I'll tell you, again, using my experience, you know, I go on Facebook, I go on YouTube, I preach face to face, I preach online, and there are people who curse and they have all kinds of evil things to say about the messages that I share. And there are people who bless and they exalt the messages and they thank God for what they hear. And I'll tell you something. If I am a pleaser of men, if I'm looking for the voice of praise or the voice of approval, some days I will be up on the mountaintop and some days I will be depressed. But you know what I've discovered? I don't care. That's what I've discovered. I've discovered that, praise God, the only voice that matters to me is the voice of the shepherd. If Jesus approves, look here, I'm so glad that I can look this evening. When I look at the viewers in this meeting, I saw it up to 43, now it's 39. If it's one person, I'm coming, because it does not matter, brothers and sisters. If the true shepherd approves of what I'm doing, what do I care how many people listen? What do I care how many people call me Beelzebub and a false teacher? What do I care? It doesn't matter. The work of God is not built by trying to please humans. The work of God is not built by human endeavor. All you do, every one of us, I'm saying it for you as I'm saying to myself, I'm saying all you need to do is to make sure you're connected to the shepherd. And when he speaks, you will hear. And he's not just speaking of the teaching, because sometimes, yeah, the teaching is definitely a part of it, absolutely. But sometimes it's where do you feel that sense of the Spirit of Christ? Where do you find that attitude, like you can know that Christ is working here? It has a lot to do with the teaching, but it is even more than that. Sometimes it's the attitude of people and the spirit of people. And this is what Jesus means when he says, the sheep follow him, for they know his voice. And the stranger will they not follow, but they will flee from him, for they know not the voice of strangers. Remember that this is speaking primarily of Jesus, but it also applies to the under shepherds. Okay, so this is a very telling thing. I love, sometimes I say that I am a fatalist, and what I mean by this is that I'm not worried about how things will turn out. I thank God that I'm like this. I know my limitations. I know that I'm a teacher of the Bible. I'm not a good organizer. I'm not a good administrator. I fall short in those areas. When it comes to planning, I'm not good. I will tell anybody that. People who expect this from me, you're going to be disappointed. There's one thing that I know, that I believe the Lord has placed on me, and it is to teach His word. All right? But the thing is, it's not a problem for me. Because when you come to the place where you know that the work is not yours, all you do is follow the shepherd. It's his business to take care of everything else. He is a shepherd. He's the guide. He's the leader. He's the administrator. He does what needs to be done. Nothing else matters. You know the voice of the shepherd, and that is all. So, it says Jesus told them this parable and they didn't understand. So, in the right panel, we have where Jesus begins to explain. As I said, Jesus said unto them again. Well, it's the same thing on the left panel. We can just continue on the left panel, all right? We looked at verse 8. All that ever came before me are thieves and robbers, but the sheep did not hear them. And then he tells you in verse 9, I am the door. By me, if any man enter in, he shall be saved, and shall go in and out and find pasture. There it is. This is the way to be saved. And again, you know, for those people who think that salvation is by the doctrines that you believe, please be corrected. It is by coming to Christ. Christ is a person. Yes, it is through doctrine that you come to know Christ. It is through doctrine that you can understand the ways of Christ. But Christ is a person. That's why I say develop a friendship with Him. If we are not talking with Him, communicating with Him, working with Him, brothers and sisters, the relationship will grow cold. It might even become non-existent. We have to have a relationship with Him. I am the door. By me, if any man enter in, he shall be saved, and shall go in and out and find pasture. That's how we are saved. Okay? So, you know, you can even have false shepherds who come with the true doctrine. That's something I want to point out. They might come with the true doctrine, but they are false shepherds. And here's why you know how Jesus illustrates that they are false shepherds. Look at what He says. The thief cometh not but for to steal and to kill and to destroy. You can have somebody who claims to be a child of Christ, but effectively what the person does, he is destroying the sheep. Okay, I actually was separated from the Seventh-day Adventist Church, not because of false doctrine. I was separated along with 35 other people because the pastor, and not just the pastor, the whole conference, they tried to dominate our lives and to compel us to bend to certain ideas that we thought were unreasonable. They wanted to say we could not work outside of our pastoral district. You couldn't go and hand out tracts somewhere else. We couldn't write and print tracts and hand out. They had to come from the church. These are the kinds of, we could not kneel when we were praying. Those are the kinds of things that they made into a great issue and eventually disfellowshipped us. Now, the problem with the administration was not that they were interested in teaching the truth. That was not the issue. It didn't have to do with doctrinal truth. It didn't have to do with our relationship to Christ. It had to do with the fact that they needed to dominate and bring us under the yoke. And that is what Jesus means when He says the thief, he comes in among the sheep. And what is he looking for? He's looking to see how much he can collect in terms of tithes and offering. Right? As a matter of fact, when the representative from the conference finally came to us, the first question that he asked was, what do we do with our tithes? And that's a question almost everybody who has objected to the position we took, that's almost the first question that they asked. What do you do with your tithes? Because for them, it's a question of how much can you get out of the people? I heard one minister say, if you don't feed the sheep, you cannot fleece the sheep. Yes, he actually used those words. Right? What he was actually saying, if you don't feed the sheep, then you won't be able to get any tithes and offerings. Which in a way may be true, but at the same time, you could see feeding the sheep was a means to an end, and the end was to receive tithes and offerings. And that kind of mindset is a mindset of a thief. That's a mindset of a hireling. Jesus says, the reason I come, I don't want your money. I don't want anything from you. What I am come is to give you something. The thief comes to see what he can get out of you, and he doesn't mind if you are destroyed. But he says, I have come to give you something. I have come that they might have life, and that they might have it more abundantly. And, I'm going to, at one point, Paul asked the people to forgive him for a little bit of boasting. And I will boast a little bit if I may. I'm not really boasting. Please, if I say boasting, I'm just being a little tongue-in-cheek. But what I want to say is, I want to highlight something, that in 1993, we kind of officially started the ministry that I now belong to. We were actually working together since 1985. But I would say about 1993, we officially became a ministry. I left my job in 1993 forever. I never went back to teaching. So I would say 1993. But here's the thing. I want to use the word proud, but the word pride carries a bad meaning. But I don't mean proud in a bad way. I will tell you that since 1993, 2003, 2030, it's what, nearly 40 years, is it? It's about 93, 2003, and 30 years. In 30 years, I and the representatives of this ministry have never, ever asked anybody for money. Never. And never will. Never even mentioned money. I think most of you will know that we don't talk about tithes and offering. And people have said we should. But I don't and I won't, because a lot of the time when people talk about tithes and offerings, they're kind of pointing their finger in their direction. And I don't want that to ever happen. This is not about my benefit or even my survival. I trust God put you somewhere and he calls you to something, he will take care of it. And, I can testify that for 30 years, there are many people who have said, if you need something, you can let us know. And I thank them for it, but they will never hear, and they have never heard from me, because God has always provided in the most unexpected ways. And I run this testimony because, as I said, I'm kind of proud of it. I'm glad because, I go to almost every other ministry and I see them making an appeal to support this work and so forth. Sometimes they have a project or something. Yes, I agree. But I feel happy that one of the things I use to gauge the fact that I think God is working with us is the fact that we have never even said to anybody, I need 1 cent. Never. God has just put it in people's minds to support the ministry, and it has been that way. And I also like it that way too, because I'm not obligated to anybody. Like I feel like if somebody is supportive, then I have to bend over to be pleasing to that person. When you ask people for things and then they get a certain hold over you. No. So I think Jesus was referring to this kind of thing when he says that the thief comes to steal and to kill and to destroy. Let me just read a couple of other verses, or the last couple of verses, and we will end off for today. Jesus highlighted the way of the good shepherd. I am the good shepherd, yeah. From way back in the days of Ezekiel, God had promised that there would be one flock and there would be one shepherd. And David, my servant, shall be king over them, referring to Jesus, the seed of David. But he points out that the good shepherd gives his life for the sheep. Now, I don't know if that is how all shepherds operate, but what Jesus is showing you is that in the ideal situation, the purpose of the shepherd is not to get benefit from the sheep. The purpose of the shepherd is to benefit the sheep, is to be good, is to bring something good for the sheep. This is the way of the true minister of Christ. This is the way of Christ. Christ never came to get anything from us. What did we ever give him? One of the abominable things is that people think that when they do good works, they are giving God something, they are doing God a favor. Rubbish. All the goodness is on one side, and we have been the beneficiaries. And that's what he's saying. The evil servant, the hireling, is not like that. He's looking for what he can get. And that is why he says, but he that is an hireling, he's being paid to do his job, and not the shepherd, whose own the sheep are not, seeth the wolf coming, and he leaveth the sheep and fleeth. And the wolf catcheth them and scattereth the sheep. I don't know. I have one example of this, and I'm going to just use let me read the next verse. The hireling fleeth, because he's an hireling and he careth not for the sheep. I have one graphic example. Actually, the minister who was pastor for the church where I used to belong, just before I was disfellowship, the pastor who was there before. You know, at that time in Jamaica, and I think I've told this story before, but let me tell it again. At that time in Jamaica, there was a lot of fear about, hard times coming in, and some people were even thinking that communism was coming, and a lot of Jamaicans were trying to find a way to get to the USA. And it came to my attention that this pastor was leaving. He was migrating to America. I was young and I was naive. Otherwise, I wouldn't have asked him any questions. But anyway, we were talking one day and I said, so pastor, I understand you're leaving. You're going to America. And he said, yes. The Bible says, if they persecute you in one place, you are to flee to another. I wondered what persecution was he facing. I mean, things were maybe a little harder than somewhere else, but all of us were surviving. But then I said to him, yes, you're fleeing, but pastor, you're leaving the sheep behind. And it looked like nobody had ever said that to him, and he had never thought about that, and he got very flustered, and even though he was about my complexion, his face got very red, and I don't even remember what he said, but he ended the conversation abruptly, because I could see that I'm not saying he could not leave and go to America. I'm not saying that. But I'm saying that the reason he gave was really tragic. Because if he said it was because the sword was coming while he was fleeing, if he's the shepherd of the sheep, he was a pastor, how is he leaving all the sheep behind? There's a sword coming and you're leaving them behind. You give your life for the sheep. He's supposed to stay there and nurture and build up and help the sheep. But his way is to flee and leave the sheep, because he felt like there was persecution coming. So that was a graphic illustration to me of what Jesus meant when he says that the hireling, he's working for money. And when things are slowing down or things get a little tight, he's gone. So I think that is pretty much the way of the modern pastor. The way of the modern, I'm not putting a broad brush over everybody. No, by no means. Because there are good people out there who are doing the job of pastors, but by and large, when you work for a denomination, when you work for a system and you're drawing your salary to do a job, that's what it tends to be. You're looking for a raise in your pay. You're looking to see where can I find something better. This particular pastor, I know he left and he went to America and he became a porter in a hospital. Okay, that's what he was doing for a long time. He was working as a porter. So he never had a calling to the ministry. It was simply, in my opinion, a job he was doing. And he went to where the grass was greener. And these are the kinds of situations Jesus was talking about. Anyway, I went through the full 1 hour. I thought I might have been early. I feel like my headache is pretty much gone, but I still feel a little weak. So I'm glad I was able to stand for a full hour. And I want to be thankful to our Father, our friend, and our brother Jesus, our friend, with whom we have fellowship. I want to thank them for being with us this evening and for taking us through this study of the Word. So I want to just acknowledge Brother Brian, Sister Angela, Sister Destiny, Sister Maureen. So nice to see you all. Brother Zuzumuzi, Sister Anita, Brother Florian, Sister Zadie. Blessings to you all. Sister Diane, Sister Ellen, that's Sister Ellen Jerry. And we have a Sister Helen. I haven't seen her for a while. I know things are not so well with her. But we keep her in prayer. There's Brother Michael from Germany and Brother Florian. Did I say Brother Florian? There he is. Yes, I said Brother Florian. Brother Matt is here. Sister Sharon is here. And Brother Sirap, it's good to see you again this evening. Hi to you and everyone else. Brother Patrick, Sister Chris, you're getting sunshine in Washington. That's so nice. I've been there. I know how it can be cold and spicily cold sometimes. It's very warm here in Jamaica. So, praise the Lord. I'm glad you get some sunshine, Sister Chris. Brother Benuel is here. Sister Maria is here. Sister Svetlana Sal. Good to see you, Sister Svetlana. Glad you can be with us this evening. Sister Diane says, I look feverish. I feel a little weak, Sister Diane, but I just need some good sleep, I think, or maybe there's some bug in my stomach. I'll get rid of it. Sister Lila, it's good to see you. Sister, I'll feel better, Sister Destiny. Thank you. Brother Clayton, it's good to see you. Sister Vanessa, I appreciate your presence here. Brother Reg, good to see you. And Sister Carolyn as well, maybe she's in the room as well. Brother Moss Jiggity, when should I get baptized? Brother Moss, I will say that when you believe that you have truly committed yourself to Jesus Christ, not to a church, not to a set of doctrines, but to the person Jesus Christ, when you have really committed yourself to him, then you should be baptized. I believe that very strongly, all right? Brother Elton is here. Blessing Sister Nina, of course. Good to see you, Nina. Daniel is here. Brother Colin is here. Sister Beth is here. Brother Julian is here. God bless you all. Sister Valerie is here. Good to see you, Sister Vanya. Blessings to you too. Sister Nikki is here. Brother Francisco is here. Blessings to you there in Panama to Brother Francisco. Sister Natalie is here this evening. Good day. Brother Flavius, God bless you too, Brother Flavius. Brother Edwin is here. Greetings back to you there on the East Coast, Brother Edwin. Brother Javier from South Germany. I think it's the first time, Brother Javier. So many blessings. It's so good to see you. Good evening, Brother Sam. It's good to see you. I see somebody named Firewolf who retracted his message. I'm not sure if it was meant for this fellowship. Sister Silla, blessings to you. Brother Sam says, hey, Brother David, you are my friend. It is so reassuring to hear that, Brother Sam. I'm so happy to hear. And you can rest assured that I am your friend. Good to see you, Sister Marjorie. Glad you could make it. Brother Mike is here from Trinidad. God bless you all. I think I got everybody. Oh, there's Brother Brian. And there's Sister Karina commenting at the end as usual. And Brother Leonard, greetings from Rwanda. Greetings to you there too, Brother Leonard. Good to see you. So God bless you all, my brothers and sisters. I've appreciated the time with you. I look forward to going and lying down for a bit here now. So God bless you all, and I'll see you next week. Peace and blessings and love in the name of our Father and his Son, Jesus Christ.